My name is Joel Sumner, and I propose that we change our system entirely. So, if we go back historically to what our forefathers did, they didn't have a system of writing the way we did because they didn't have printing presses. So what they had is they had one law. Basically, I'd say the foundation of law was one law, and that was no trespassing. Now, when you understand that law of no trespassing in maybe a slightly more complicated way, you end up with a crime called extortion under the color of official right. This means obtaining for private third-party benefit with official acts. That was it. So when we look at our current system, we have a system where judges are the biggest aggressors against this crime, going around committing the crime of extortion, obtaining under the color for private third-party benefit, different litigants, with official acts, with their gavel slamming down. That is not law. That is chaos. You can see that we have chaos when you look in the libraries. There are so many legal books and legal texts. You need an army of lawyers to be able to figure it out. So part of this, actually, I believe, is by design. When you create enough chaos, then what happens is that there is no clarity. So that is basically the world we live in today. For most people, there's no clarity because everything is chaos, because our entire legal structure is based on chaos. If you change the system again back, to this no trespassing, the other thing that you're going to get is you're going to get this thing called accountability. See, right now, take a corporation. If a corporation does something criminal, who do you put behind bars? Or maybe I should ask the question, who does the king put behind bars? So there's no one to really put behind bars because a corporation doesn't actually physically exist. So this creates a really unfair advantage that if you're, let's just say, a poor person, you commit a crime and you go to jail. You're a rich person, your corporation commits a crime and nobody goes to jail. So it would seem to me that when you have a system of justice where you eliminate corruption, you focus on no trespassing, you change the entire system to be one of basically chaos and corruption to one of justice and hopefully peace. So how do you create this system? Well, to me, it's kind of obvious that what you need to have someone who is going to enforce people's rights. Right now, we think it's the courts, but the courts don't enforce people's rights at all because they trespass every day, all the time. I can't even sit in court for more than 5 minutes without watching a judge trespass. So we need to have a person who is the strong man, who can enforce the rule of law. Now, that person in Canada would not be the Prime Minister, it would be His Majesty the King. And you'd also have a system of accountability. Because you see, right now, if someone were to, say a public official was to do some harm to a citizen, then that citizen can sometimes sue. He doesn't really know who to sue. Do you sue the public official? Do you sue this agency, that agency, the Crown? Who knows? It gets very complicated. When you have a clear system that, like, the government is the king, you sue the king. You don't have to wonder which alphabet agency you have to sue. You just sue the king. And then the king takes responsibility, takes accountability. I mean, he will take accountability for his men when they come into action, because that action is actually the king's action, right? Like if a police officer walks down the street and punches you in the face for absolutely no reason, that's the king that punched you in the face. Why is that the king? Because that police officer represents the king. So in a case like that, I would say that, His Majesty the King is sovereign. So His Majesty the King cannot be charged or arrested or imprisoned, because he's sovereign. So he can't get arrested for punching you in the face. But what you can do is you can sue the king. And then the king can take accountability. And then the king can deal with his men. If, on the other hand, that police officer did something corrupt, okay, so again, this would be obtaining for the private third-party benefit with an official act. Or maybe I should say, if he was alleged to have done something corrupt. The king is not going to help his man. The reason being is the king does not support corruption. So a judge who issued an order that one litigant had to pay another litigant, that judge can get sued by the litigant who had to pay, and the king will not take accountability, he'll not take responsibility, that's for the judge, because the judge had no right to do that. And you then have a system where it starts to become clear. Corruption, you sue the corrupt official. Anything else, you sue the king. It doesn't have to be so complicated, and the king can now take accountability for his actions, and the king can now actually start to, probably put in one spot an understanding of what the law actually is, what he can do and not do, instead of right now, because there's so many law books. I mean, this alphabet agency can do that, this alphabet agency can do this, right? It just starts to become more clear, it starts to become something more of law. And you can see how important His Majesty the King is. I use something that, has been called a thought experiment. So Mark Carney, the current Prime Minister of Canada, if he had a parade to come up one of the main streets in Toronto, I do believe he would get some people in attendance, but I more or less believe the attendance the audience would be lukewarm. And I don't think Mark Carney, I'm sure that some people love him or hate him, but I don't think he's really done a huge amount yet to really be loved or hated by most. But if you had His Majesty the King come up one of the main streets in Toronto in a horse and carriage, which might not be possible due to security risks, I have no idea, that would be actually a very different scenario. I think a lot of people would be very interested in going to see this carriage and horses and to get a glimpse of His Majesty the Queen, or the King. This would be something that would be of intrigue to people. It hasn't happened very frequently, as far as I know. So you can see the importance just by who we would honor. Personally, if, I got up to, His Majesty the King and Mark Carney, and His Majesty the King said go right and Mark Carney said go left, I don't think I'd have a question as to which way I'd go. Right? Would you? Who would you prefer to trust? Right? A politician or a king? So it also seems to me that when you have a monarchy, you have a continuation of, I'll call it power, although I'm not sure power is really the right word. But you have a continuation of power throughout generations. So His Majesty the King would be interested in making sure that he leaves a flourishing kingdom to his children, and his children would be interested in making sure that they leave a flourishing kingdom to their children. So you have this continuity. When you have politicians, most of them are in office for how long? They should want to milk that as much as they can. They're not really looking for generational success. They're looking for personal success. That's sort of human nature. I don't even know why we should expect anything less. So I don't see how our current system is really benefiting people. Some people, sure, myself included, but I see the system as being really detrimental to most people. I see that a lot of people are in pain. There's a constant struggle for people, and for what? Right? Really, for what? It's just this constant, we got the economy, the economy, the economy. The economy is not the be-all and end-all. The be-all and end-all is quality of life. Long live the King.